What if the key to unlocking your potential wasn't about working harder, but rewiring your mind for lasting change? In this episode, I sit down with the incredible Beck King from Moonbeam Monday. Beck shares her powerful journey from living with debilitating anxiety to becoming a leading NLP and hypnotherapy coach, helping high-achieving women break free from self-doubt, perfectionism, and overwhelm. We dive deep into the subconscious mind, the impact of childhood experiences, and the small daily practices that can transform your life and business. Plus, Beck reveals her exciting 2025 plans, including stepping onto global stages to inspire even more women. If you're ready to challenge your beliefs, reprogram your mind, and step fully into your potential, this episode is your sign. Welcome to Unleashed and Empowered, the podcast for visionaries and hard-led entrepreneurs who refuse to shrink or settle. I'm Alice Taugs, your host, guide, and fellow traveler in the messy but magical journey of entrepreneurship, blending spirituality, energy, intuition, and AI to amplify aligned business and personal power. Through raw conversations, both solo and with inspiring guests, we explore the moments that change everything, helping you trust yourself, redefine success, and create with courage and ease. You are exactly where you're meant to be. Let's dive in. Welcome to the Unleashed and Empowered podcast. And in today's episode, we have Beck, or Rebecca King, from Moonbeam Monday, and we'll dive into what that means a little bit later, so stay tuned. I start every episode with asking my guests to just share a little bit about their life, how they got to where they are today, and you can go into as much detail or as little detail as you like, because we've got plenty of time. So Beck, thank you so much for being on the podcast, and the floor is all yours.
Thanks, Alice. It's great to be here, and it's my pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me. Yeah, obviously, like everybody, it's always a long story to tell you how we got here. So I guess I'll give you a bit of a short version. But I lived for more than 20 years with really debilitating depression. And then anxiety on top of that. It affected every area of my life, personal, relationships, professional. And it got to the point where it was so bad that I couldn't get out of bed. And I couldn't even figure out how I was going to live the rest of my life feeling the way that I did. And as luck would have it, I guess, or although we don't believe in luck, do we? Divine intervention. I was introduced to a coach, an NLP or neuro-linguistics programming coach. Now, this was after years and years of searching for answers. I have always been somebody who wants to know more. I want a solution. I'd been to every kind of practitioner you can possibly think of to try and help me out of this funk. And so I was introduced to an NLP coach by my mum. And honestly, I was really skeptical because I'd never been able to find any help or relief or any long-lasting solutions. And so I sort of went along with a bit of chip on my shoulder, if I'm honest, thinking, well, what's he going to do that everybody else hasn't been able to help me with? And it was the beginning of that next chapter. You know what I'm talking about. You know, it was just the beginning of something different. I can barely even remember the first few coaching sessions, but something shifted. He was able to help me lift the depression and the anxiety. So I actually got to a point where I can now very honestly and confidently say I no longer have depression. I no longer have anxiety. I do not identify with those conditions. And this is something, as I said, that I lived with for over 20 years. So I figured there was something in that. And I was like, that's really interesting. Anyway, I went on with my life. And my mum, again, said, oh, Beck, I'm doing a little NLP course. I want to know more about how the mind works. I think you should do it with me. I think you'll find it really interesting. And again, I was like, oh, I'm too busy, you know, all of those excuses. And anyway, kicking and screaming, I signed up for it. And within 5 weeks of that course, it was a 35-week course, I knew that this was it for me.
Wow.
It was that catalyst. It was a real life-changing moment. I didn't go into it with any intention of changing my career or becoming a coach or anything like that. But what I discovered in that training was it was a game changer. This was, people talk about that light bulb moment. This was that light bulb moment. And I'll tell you what it actually was that convinced me that everybody needed to know about this. It was a technique that we did in the course, and my trainer, his name's Ricky, said, who has something that they eat or drink that they know is not good for them that is actually a problem, right? Everybody put their hand up, of course. And I was like, me. I am addicted to potato chips. Now, I'm not talking about you like potato chips, if they're in front of you, you'll eat them. I am talking about eating them in secret at night at 11 o'clock, stuffing them in your face like you can't get enough of them, addicted.
Wow.
And I said, I know this is not good for me. I don't feel good when I'm doing it. I know this is like a binge kind of thing. And I said, this is my problem. And he said, all right, we're going to do a technique. And he took me through this technique. It probably only took 30, 40 minutes. And the result from going through this process with me was that I didn't eat another potato chip for over a year.
Wow.
I couldn't look at them. I couldn't even walk down the supermarket aisle without feeling a gag reflex. That was such a pivotal moment for me that I was like, there's something in this brain-changing stuff and I need to learn it. I need to teach it to other people, and I need to help other people who have been in the situation or had those conditions, being labelled with these conditions that I have, because there is a way out.
Yeah. You go. I already have so many questions.
That I was just going to say, that's it in a nutshell. I now help people in so many ways, and I'm sure we'll talk about that, but that was it for me.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll talk about that in more detail. So obviously you would have gone, as you explained, you would have gone to so many different professionals and so many different modalities.
Yeah.
How long do you think it took you to go from traditional medicine down the path of, well, clearly this is not helping me, so there have to be other methods out there that I can explore, that I could be open to?
That's a really good question, Alice. Look, I've always been interested in what you might still call alternative therapies. I remember seeing a naturopath for the first time in my late teens. I remember this guy calling himself a witch doctor, seeing somebody in my 20s. I was always searching because I never felt right. Had some health concerns, like fatigue, upset tummy, like all of the things that so many of us have. And we go to doctors or medical professionals and we're just told it's normal, or it's within the normal range. And I'm not satisfied with that, because I don't believe that it's normal to feel lethargic or exhausted after exercise or bloated after every meal or whatever it might be for you, or to feel like you've got a brain fog all the time. It's not normal to be able to get out of bed. It's, and I know that we don't usually use the word normal, but in this case, we should be able to feel better than that. And so I was always searching for something. I was brought up not really believing in what so many people might even refer to as woo-woo, some of those alternative therapies. So it took me a little while to be okay with searching for that kind of thing. I guess it got to a point where I realized the traditional methods were not working for me. They weren't changing anything, including medication. And it really was when I had that breakthrough with my NLP coach that I went, okay, there's something in this, and I need to start exploring other modalities. I've heard about this, I've heard about that. Let's just start tinkering a little bit.
Wow, yeah, so powerful, because obviously, in our circle, we're very open around our connection to spirit and our beliefs around manifestations and things like that. Do you think that obviously combining NLP techniques with perhaps some of the more spiritual aspects or techniques might advance things a little bit quicker in, do you want to call it a recovery phase, or what do you want to call that?
We can call it a recovery phase. I guess it probably is a bit of a recovery phase, isn't it? Look, I'm of the, how will I put this? I'm of the belief that there's not a one size fits all for everyone. I believe that you should find what works for you. So if you have found a traditional method that works for you and is giving you the results that you truly want, fantastic. But if we're really honest with ourselves and it's not giving us those results that we, sometimes we're a bit afraid to even hope for, then perhaps it's time to look for something else. So, and I've also always said, it takes a village. So most people, they don't just have one doctor, for example. You might have your GP who you'd go to for certain things. You might go to a naturopath or a nutritionist. You go to a chiropractor, or, you go to specialists. And so all of the different modalities that we, as you said, our group, we all have a hand in, each of them complement each other. But they're really based on the same foundational principles, if you really look into it. And a lot of these have been around for thousands and thousands of years. There's a reason that they're still around. They work. And so if we really dive into each of these modalities, we find that they have those same foundational principles. So of course, they fit really well together. And there's that compounding effect as well. So if we use a little bit from here and a little bit from here and a little bit from here, we come up with our perfect solution.
I guess that's being a manifesting generator, isn't it?
Yes, which you taught me that, isn't it? I need a little bit of that, a little bit of that, a little bit of that.
Yeah. Sorry, had to drop that one in. Of
course.
One of the things that I had found really fascinating, because I grew up with a mum who was sort of battling with some shape or form of mental disorder. I don't really like using the word disorder in her case, but let's just use it as that for ease of reference. So for me, one of the things that I was always really passionate about is, well, how do people live a fulfilling life so that you don't get to a stage where you have anxiety or where you develop depression and you just don't really have that positive outlook on life. And so I recently came across this book, and somebody stole it out of my cupboard, so I don't remember exactly what the title was, but I think we have talked about this book before, and it was around that we're now getting to the stage where we have research around the connection or disconnection of spirituality when it comes to some of those mental disorders. And obviously I know that not everyone can be, put into those classifications perhaps that they have used in that book. But it was really interesting to see, now that they have the ability to scan the brain during, a meditation or during, I don't know, even a prayer or whatever people use as a modality, or being in nature. And just seeing how much that changes the brain structure for the better. And obviously, Joe Dispenza has been very leading in that field as well, but Dr. Joe Dispenza is not for everyone, especially not those that are new to sort of the area. But I think we have come a really long way. Do you find that some of the alternate techniques that you're using are a lot more accepted in places?
Yes, I would have to say yes. And the positive person in me says yes, of course. I mean, it's still, neurolinguistics is still, for a lot of people, because it's not one of the traditional methods, is still a bit of a scary space for people. When I explain a little bit more about it, or we give examples of the techniques and we simplify it, it takes that fear out of it. So it does become more widely accepted, I think. We talk about hypnotherapy because I'm a hypnotherapist as well. And we use a lot of hypnotherapy. Well, I use a lot of hypnotherapy with my clients. Now, hypnotherapy, for example, is something that has been completely what's the word? People don't really understand hypnotherapy. And I was one of these people as well. So I'm just putting it out there to say, I thought it was what you see on TV and, cluck like a chicken and, all this kind of stuff.
I just was going to say that you run around like a little chicken on stage.
Or bark like a dog.
Embarrass yourself.
Exactly. It's not the true essence of what hypnotherapy is. We don't put people to sleep. We don't make you do weird stuff. It's about bypassing that critical conscious mind, which it makes up a very small part of your mind, but it's what gets in our way because it's making the decisions based on so many things from the past. And what we actually want to do is we want to get to that part of the mind where lasting change occurs. And so hypnotherapy is essentially just creating a really relaxed state. And it's self-hypnotherapy. I can't hypnotize you. if you don't want to be hypnotized. So this is where explaining things to people and helping them understand what is actually happening, it takes the fear out of it. And so I think that's, to answer your question, is when we do that, it makes it more widely acceptable by other people. Until then, I think people can sometimes think what we're doing is witchy and woo-woo, and, you know, we're convening with, you know, things that they find scary and have perhaps been brought up to believe aren't true. Yeah. And it's not to knock anybody's beliefs. You believe what you believe, but actually, why do you believe that? Where did that belief come from? Beliefs aren't facts.
No.
So, yeah.
Most of the time they're not. So let's dive a little bit into that, because obviously, so this is not just a podcast for business. This is also a podcast for life, because as we know, you know, every business is run by people, and how you run the business is largely correlated to who you are as a person. And so beliefs obviously have gotten so much in the way of me trying to grow my business, to step further into who I am as a business owner and as a leader and as a solopreneur or entrepreneur, because of some of the crap that teachers, relatives, and God knows who have told me when I was really little. And obviously we now know the impact that that has on the brain, especially when you go through the core years of, what was it, 7 to 13?
0 to 7. 0 to 7, the impact. Yeah.
So obviously the stuff that you hear then is very critical for brain development, but then also what you keep hearing over and over again obviously creates these pathways, and it's very hard to challenge those beliefs. And a lot of people don't even know that you can challenge beliefs. Do you want to talk to us a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. If I can perhaps give you an example so that people can relate to this. You know, think back to when you were in primary school, for example, and did you do show and tell where you went to school? Where you get up?
No, they didn't really have that. No.
It might be an Australian thing.
Yeah, it could be.
In Australia, we had show and tell perhaps every Monday morning, and so we'd go to school, we'd be excited, we'd bring a thing that we found in the garden, or we'd tell a story about what we did on the weekend, and we'd get up and say, good morning everyone, on the weekend, blah blah blah, and we'd tell our story. Everybody would clap and you'd sit down. So it was like a sharing kind of circle. So if you got up and shared your story, or whatever it might have been that you were sharing that particular day, and your teacher said, well, that was, you know, you didn't present that very well, like you were too quiet, or that was a really boring story, or didn't even give you any feedback, but maybe gave the next person some really good feedback, or they clapped for the next person, but they hadn't clapped for you. It could have been any number of those things. And what that might have, the impression that might have left you with is that there was something wrong with what I just did. It wasn't accepted. I'm now fearful of getting up next week and doing this, because what if I get the same reaction? What if I'm told off again? What if I'm told that I'm no good? And so it creates this fear, and we store this fear, this emotion in our body and in our unconscious mind. And if we don't acknowledge it and deal with it at that particular time and let it go, then it just stays in our body. Now, as a 5-year-old, 6-year-old, 7-year-old, we don't know how to deal with that, right? So, of course, we don't go, what's this done for me? How can I let this go? So we store that. And then the next time we're in a situation where the same kind of thing happens, it compounds. And the next time and the next time. So we might get to a point where we're, let's just say, in our 20s or our 30s, perhaps we have started a business, perhaps we're even just working for somebody else, and we're told that we need to get up and present about ourselves or about our product in front of other people. And I know that some of your listeners are going to be going, oh my goodness, I just feel like I want to hide under the covers right now.
Exactly.
They know what I'm talking about, right? And you go, my goodness, I can't get up in front of people. I'm a really bad public speaker. And what's going on is fear of judgment, fear of failure, fear of rejection, all of these things that go back to that first time you stood up in front of your class or whoever it might have been, and you were told that you did a bad job in whatever way that was. That's now feeding through into your adult life. And that might stop you from you've got something to share with the world, it might stop you from doing that. You need to relay critical information to your team, and you can't do that because you can't get up and stand in front of people. This is a belief. All right, this is a belief. It's a fear there that what's going to happen when you stand up in front of people is that something bad is going to happen, right? And your brain starts going into overdrive to protect you because that's what it does, right? Our brain, its primal response is for you to survive. And so this is an example of how a belief that was formed without us even knowing unconsciously when we were young is now getting in our way as an adult. And I think, like you said, it's not until somebody tells us that this is actually how it's happening, or that this is actually happening, and we work with someone to identify or to how do we identify these beliefs? How do we identify the ones that are holding us back from doing the things that we want to do, from living the life that we want to live? How do we identify them, and then how do we shift them?
Absolutely. Because especially as solopreneurs, like we have to wear incredibly different hats. Like, we have to do the social media, we have to do the marketing, we have to do the public speaking, we have to jump on podcasts, or we don't have to, but it's advantageous if you have something to share that you use public forums to do that. But I remember, and it's probably still to this day, where going on social still feels uncomfortable. And I think it comes back down to some moment or a few moments back in childhood when you were told you're not good enough, it's dangerous to put yourself out there. It means that you'll get removed from the pack in case you have an opinion about something that is not widely accepted. And obviously, that can really prevent us from living our true purpose and from stepping into all that who we are, which then obviously subsequently means lower income potential. So how would you even go about something like that? Give us some starting points.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, it's a good question, Alice. The first thing really we always come back to is self-awareness. All right. So first of all, actually just becoming aware that this is a thing, and your listeners are at that beginning point, or maybe they're further along, but they're at least at that beginning point because they're listening to this. They're thinking there's something in this. I'm starting to, with some of these examples or the things that you're saying, I'm starting to perhaps identify that I may have some of these beliefs. So that the first step is self-awareness. So taking the time or giving yourself the time to find out more about this. So listening to podcasts, reading some of those books, following the right people. I'm going to insert that, the right people on social media. I think that's a whole other podcast topic.
It is.
So surrounding yourself with these things so that you're planting some seeds, right? So you're learning a little bit more, you're becoming aware. Some of the tools that we talk about, they're such simple tools that a lot of people, and this used to be me, a lot of people think, well, that's too simple, that's not going to work, or I've tried it before and it hasn't worked for me. Now, I'm talking about things like journaling, breath work, meditation. Right? So I used to be this person who's like, I've tried to meditate and I can't do it. I can't quiet my mind down. Well, sure, when you start, any of your listeners listening at the moment think, I want to ask you, have you ever learned a musical instrument? When you first learned English, Alice, were you good at it the first day, the first week, the first month? Could you speak fluently?
No.
But now you're fluent. Right? So you kept doing it, you kept practicing it, and you kept using it, and you became a fluent English speaker, right? So meditation, for example, is no different. Using breath work to calm your nervous system, to re-engage your parasympathetic nervous system out of the fight, flight, freeze mode. It can be done instantly, but it takes practice, right? Because we've been in this stress state for so long. And then journaling, actually getting it out of your head. There is science to prove that getting this out of your head by writing it down, and there's a whole lot of stuff behind that, actually changes the pathways in your brain. And we can become aware through these activities because we're actually giving ourselves time to look inward. And I think this is a really critical point, Alice, is so many of us spend a lot of our time looking outward looking at the outside world, at the people around us, what we call a blame culture. Well, if they would just change their behavior, then I wouldn't have a problem. But we can't control anybody else's behavior. We can't control how somebody else thinks. We can't know every single thought that somebody else has. All we can control is what we think, how we speak to ourselves, how we speak to other people, and our own actions and behaviors. So it's about turning things around and looking inward rather than looking outward. And so you asked, where do we start? We start with self-awareness. We start by looking inward. Forget about what everybody else is doing. All right, in a perfect world, everybody would be doing this, and so, we'd all be feeling good. But start reflecting inwardly, and you can use some of those tools that I mentioned to get started with that.
And the great thing is they're all free of charge as well. You don't even have to spend any money.
Exactly, they're free. You can do them anytime, anywhere. You don't have to sit down for an hour and meditate. You can do it for 5 minutes if that's all you've got at that particular time. Breath work, gosh, you can do that in the car on your way to work if you want to. So you're right, they're all free. You can do them anytime, anywhere.
So obviously one of the things that you have just alluded to as well is the culture that we're living in is a binge culture. And I've actually just listened to a podcast with Marianne and Bronwyn, who are both guests on my podcast as well, how we binge so much and how we get distracted so easily. And I mean, I'm none better because, whenever shit hits the fan, all my knowledge goes out the window, and I have to really work hard on getting myself back into the groove because it's so easy to jump on Netflix and binge that.
Yeah.
For me, it's Virgin River at the moment. I'm obsessed with
Okay.
Virgin River.
For me, it's always going back to Sex and the City.
Or Sex and the City, exactly. Or, then you jump on Instagram, or you go back to your business, because obviously as solopreneurs, it's so critical for us to have that steady income stream. So it's very easy to just get into the hustle culture and into the binge culture.
Mm-hmm.
Any thoughts on that?
A lot of thoughts, yeah. So I'm guessing what you're asking is, what do we do? How do we get out of that?
Pattern interrupts, yeah.
Yeah, pattern interrupts, absolutely. What I can tell you is once you've been through the process, we always talk about you've got to put the work in, right? You can work with someone, you can work with a coach, practitioner, whoever it is. They're there to guide you. They're merely the vehicle. It's each of us individually who have to do the work. There's another saying there, you get out of it what you put in. So I guess one of the important things to note here is that it will take effort. A lot of the things that we're talking about are very simple, not necessarily easy. Mm-hmm. Now, I'm very aware of language. Of course, neuro-linguistics, language plays an incredibly powerful part in what we deem possible, even. Mm-hmm. So I don't always like to say it's not easy, but what I mean by that is it takes effort. We must actually put the time and effort into doing these things so that they become a new habit. Because, you're talking about the Netflix, the Instagram, all of that. It's a habit. But it's also coming back to, and this is the foundational work that you and I do, is what are you avoiding? What are you actually avoiding? In fact, I just recorded my own podcast about an hour ago, all about procrastination and how procrastination is a pattern or a habit. And it's not about laziness. It's not that you need to be more disciplined, because I hear that a lot from people saying, I just need more discipline. No, it's not a personality trait. There's something else going on. And this is where that self-reflection comes into it. What am I stressed about right now? What am I avoiding right now by going and getting a quick hit of dopamine from my Sex and the City episode, or all of my likes on Instagram, or whatever it might be for you, binge eating maybe. So it's about asking more questions, digging a little deeper, which yes, can be a little bit uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. But what do we say to people? Get comfortable being uncomfortable, because it's that discomfort. Once you push through that discomfort, that is where the gold is.
Absolutely, yeah.
So that would be what I would recommend for anyone who's like, I'm stuck in this pattern of every time I need to do this, I go and do this instead. Pull yourself out of that situation, and give yourself a moment to actually forgive yourself, first of all. You must forgive yourself for binging or procrastinating, whatever you want to call it. And there's actually research to show, Alice, that when we forgive ourselves, we're less likely to do it again in the future. But it might take a few times, just like creating any habit takes a few goes. So we forgive ourselves and we go and identify the real reason that we're avoiding this particular thing. And then we take action. We work out what we need to do to take action.
Yeah. Obviously, again, coming back to our little group that we have the luxury of having very open and honest and vulnerable conversations. And obviously, one of the premises that I would like to keep with this podcast is to be vulnerable and to be real about the stuff that we also go through personally. And I think it's important to highlight at this point as well is it doesn't matter whether you are a professional life coach or a business coach or an NLP practitioner or whatever else you are. Sometimes our tools go out the window when, something close to our heart has hit us, and we then also just need to acknowledge that it's okay to be lying in bed for a day crying. That's not the end of the world, but I think it's just having the awareness to know this is temporary, this is okay, right now I'm feeling pain, but I will get out of it, and the moment I go to sleep and wake up the next day, some of that pain will most likely already have eased off again. So it's not that permanent state that we're in. But, we're also so critical and so harsh on ourselves when we have those moments and get so upset and annoyed with ourselves to say, no, this can't happen, this is not allowed to happen. So yeah, I just wanted to acknowledge, and I had one of those days. I actually had 2 of those days last week where I was just completely wiped out by something that happened. And yeah, it did take me some time to get out of that spiral, and I could see the spiral. I was observing the spiral. And I was like, you suck. That is so annoying.
Yeah, it's a really important point, Alice, and I'm glad that you brought that up, because I think a lot of people can look at not just those of us who are life coaches or in this space. It could be anyone, and this is where social media it plays a large part in this. Most people only put the good stuff on social media, and so we see people living these amazing lives. And people like you and me and those in our group that you refer to, we have done a lot of work to be where we are now and to feel the way that we do. And we all acknowledge that we've still got probably even more to do. So we are constantly learning, we're constantly educating ourselves. So we might look like we're, like you said before, like we've got our shit together. And to a degree we do, but there are days where we throw our toys out of the cot and we have a meltdown and we throw a little tantrum. But the difference is that we're able to pick things up quicker or easier. We don't get stuck down in the bottom of that spiral that you're referring to. But the thing with what you were saying before, we need to feel our feelings. We've probably been told that from time to time throughout our life, but there's a lot of people who have also been told, even as children, we don't talk about that. Suck it up. Stop being a princess. Cry. Yeah,
don't be so emotional.
Exactly. You're such an emotional female. Boys don't cry. All of these types of things that we've been told. So this has been planting seeds our whole life. And so we get to a point where we don't allow ourselves to feel our feelings. And if I go back to the primary school example before, we hold on to those feelings, those emotions. Now, ignoring those emotions doesn't mean that they go away. So I'm just going to say that again. When we ignore our emotions, it doesn't make them go away. They're stored in our body and in our mind, and they just sit there until we've got so many piled on top of each other that often there's a breaking point. And I'm sure a lot of your listeners will be resonating with this. Will be like, oh yeah, I had this big outburst at work. I don't know where it came from, but I just had this emotional outburst. Oh, it must have been hormones. Well, it might have been, but it also might have been all of the crap that's been piling up for years and years and years. And it's like the proverbial straw that broke the camel's back.
Yeah. Or the tip of the iceberg that you can see, and the rest is
exactly
part of it. Yeah.
And so I really like that point that you made, that we have to use our own tools. We don't always get it right. I had a day like that yesterday. Something happened first thing in the morning, which was a really upsetting experience, and it's really knocked me. And I felt very down the whole day. And I had to actually give myself the day to feel I literally said that to someone. I'm going to allow myself to feel my feelings. I'm going to feel like crap. I'm going to have a glass of wine tonight. I'm going to sit in this space because I know that tomorrow I'm going to start shifting out of it. But I'm just going to give myself a moment. And it's, the issue isn't resolved yet, but I feel a hell of a lot better today because I allowed myself to feel it yesterday. Yeah.
What we're obviously saying is that the shoving down of constant emotions can cause this internal volcano that can sometimes erupt.
Yes.
From your experience working with some of the cases of the people that have experienced anxiety, is that a latch linking factor, or is there also other triggers, environmental triggers or anything else that can be pointed back to that as well?
Yeah, of course. Look, there could be lots of things going on here, but if I use some of the examples that I have, people that I've worked with specifically with anxiety, we must look at anxiety or any condition like that as the symptom. So we're actually looking for the root cause of what's going on. So anxiety is the underlying emotion there is fear, right? It's a fear of what might happen. Because, with anxiety, we're talking about the future. When we talk about things like depression, for example, that I mentioned earlier, we're thinking about the past. So, and it's fear-based for a lot of these things. So with anxiety, it's the end result, it's the symptoms. So we need to have a look at where did this fear come from? And so this is where we look for the root cause. Again, I refer back to the example I gave earlier. It could be any number of things, of course, but I use that primary school example to sort of illustrate that. So I don't work with people to say, all right, well, in the moment of anxiety, this is what you can do, although we do have tools because, of course, it's not necessarily an instant fix, but we're digging deeper. We're going to look at why is this happening in the first place? Let's address that, right? It's kind of like a house, Alice. If you've built a house, and you start getting cracks in the walls, or, your roof shingles are falling off, it's usually not to do with the fact that the walls or the roof are poor quality. We've got to go and look at the foundation. Were the footings dug well? Was the earth left to settle? What was was the concrete of good quality? All of these types of things. We need to actually go back to the foundations of things. Are we living in alignment with our values? Do we actually know what we value? Not what everybody else that raised us values, but what do we value and what do we believe? This fear that then shows itself in conditions like anxiety are often a misalignment. And, again, if I just harp back to the power of language, we are a society that love to label ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
We love a label. And, I used to go hunting for these labels because we assume that if we have a label, then we can find a solution, we can find a fix, right? But when we identify ourselves as, say, having anxiety, then we manifest that as well, right?
Yeah.
Our brain goes to find all the evidence of all the times that we've got anxiety. So I'm not saying that I never feel anxious. Of course I do. I'm a human. I'm in situations from time to time where I feel anxious, but I don't have anxiety. Yeah. I hope that answers that question.
Yeah, I love language, and I probably have not realized the power of language until I started looking into manifestation a lot more. And so obviously you and we work with affirmations as well in order to try and reprogram to like a subtle extent and to wake up in the morning with the positive thoughts and things like that. It was baffling how many times per day you used language that was limiting to a very large extent. Like, for instance, if you're trying to create financial freedom, a lot of people put the affirmation, I want to be debt free. And what the brain anchors on is debt. And so obviously you then accumulating or looking for more opportunities to create that. So I'm really urging people to do a little bit of an audit and just reflect on how many times have you used language that was really positive, and how many times have you used language during the day that was more limiting in its nature. It's really quite scary if you don't have the ability to change that and to become aware of that.
Yeah, that's when I learned how the brain actually hears language. It was like this, like kind of moment, Alice. What a lot of people don't know until their attention is brought to it is that our brain doesn't hear that negative, right? So what we start off by doing is saying, if I said to you, if you came to me as a client and I said, okay, well, what is it that if you're feeling anxious right now, what do you want to feel instead? And what happens is quite often you'll start with, well, I don't want to feel that tightness in my chest. I don't want that brain fog. I don't want to have a panic attack. So what your brain is hearing is, I want a brain fog. I want a panic attack. I want to feel that tightness in my chest, because it just doesn't hear that negative word there. So it is all about the reframe. So we know what you don't want. So let's reframe that into what you do want. I want to feel light and energized and in control, perhaps, for example. And we can take affirmations one step further. Affirmations are great if you already believe that statement. And we touched on beliefs before. So if you've got an underlying belief that you may not even be aware you've got, and you use an affirmation such as, I am
a millionaire. That's the typical one for entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
I am a millionaire.
I am a millionaire.
Goes, excuse me, have you seen your bank account? You're so far from it. You're not. You're full of rubbish.
Exactly. I mean, but it could even be something like, I am happy and fulfilled, right? Now, that's a beautiful thing to say, but if there is a belief or there's some things that we need to help you see a different perspective and to let go, without you even knowing, your unconscious mind is going, you're not happy, you're not fulfilled. And so you could say that affirmation every day for the next 5 years. It's still not going to have the impact that you want. So what we can look at, and this was a little book that I was introduced to a few years back. It's actually Afformations.
I know affirmations.
Yes.
Great.
So it's forming questions to bring your brain to the result that you want. So why do I find it so easy to wake up feeling energized in the morning? Because when we ask a question, our brain wants to answer it. So we need to be very mindful about the questions that we ask our brain as well, so that it goes and finds the evidence that we want it to find.
Love it. Love it, love it. Because, yeah, that's exactly what happened. Like, you go around and you say, I'm happy, I'm successful. And it's like, well, currently you don't even have any clients signed up. So how can you be successful? Because we obviously have all these predetermined ideas of what success means, about what fulfillment means, what being financially free means. And it's also then obviously getting the clarity and again doing the internal work to figure out, what does that look like for me? Because the business that I want to have is not the business that you want to have. And so I can't teach you my framework and say, well, copy exactly what I'm doing. First of all, because it doesn't work from a human design perspective, but also because we all want different things, and that is perfectly okay. But we obviously need to get to a point where we can use those forming questions to, again, reprogram the mind and call in those manifestations. So I know in your business, we all evolve in our business. And I know that, over the last 12 months, there has been some really exciting stuff happening for you. First of all, you have launched your podcast, and yes. Then you have also pivoted a little bit. Do you want to tell us what is on the horizon for you for 2025? What are you working on?
Yes. Okay. So many things. Do you know, one of the things that I'm working on the most, Alice, is not a thing as such. It's about setting some boundaries for myself and for my business. So yes, there's lots of things in the pipeline, and I'll give you a snapshot in a moment. But as you brought up at the beginning, I am a manifesting generator, and your listeners will understand what that means from from what you do. And this is what I have learned, and I haven't even, dug into this in enough detail yet. I am a shiny object person, okay? I was on a call recently and we coined this as SOS, shiny object syndrome. Like, it's not to label ourselves, it's just to have a bit of fun. But I am one of those people that I love variety. I see an opportunity, I see a shiny object. I'm like, oh my goodness, I want to do that too. So the last 3 years in business has been a lot of that. So what I am working on this year is creating a new habit of creating a plan and sticking to the plan. So it's still a work in progress. Going from everything up here to here, that is a challenge for someone like me. But I've had to be very clear on my why. Why am I doing this? For what purpose? It's my favorite question. For what purpose? By the end of 2025, where do I want to be? This is where your visualization, your manifestation comes into play. Where do I want to be? What do I want to have achieved? And going into the nitty-gritty detail as well. So for me, that's what I'm working on from a personal and professional perspective.
Love it.
Because I don't look at just my professional as well. My personal very much comes into that. My health is very much a focus for me this year. And so I need to make sure that it melds together. On the actual what's in store for 2025 for Moonbeam Monday, we also have a collective, and we absolutely love this connection, as it is for you, is super important to me. This is why I love the group that you've created. It has been life-changing for me in the last year to connect with you and these women. And so we're doing something similar in an educational type of way, and that's a big focus, to be able to bring more women into that, to offer this safe space where they can not only learn about themselves, but they can connect with other people who are on that same journey. Because I hear a lot of women saying, I don't know who my tribe is, and so this is what we're all trying to do this. So our collective is a big focus. And then how do I put this? So speaking, getting on the stage. This is my big focus for this year, because I love working one-on-one with people, but there are so many people in this world who want and need help and support. We want to be the best version of ourselves. We want to achieve certain things. We want to create a kinder and better world. And doing that one-on-one, it's going to be a very, very slow job. So having the opportunity to speak to many people at once is a big goal of mine. And we do that through speaking at events, speaking at conferences, that type of thing. I've always been confident speaking in front of people. I guess I didn't have that teacher telling me that I'm no good. I had teachers telling me plenty of other things. Don't worry about that. But so this is something that I'm working toward this year, and it's taken me a little while to get there. I've had to work through some beliefs and some stuff to actually put myself out there and work out what message it is that I want to share. And so by 2025, you will definitely have seen me on the stage. How's that for an affirmation?
Love it, love it, love it. And I was hoping that you would give us a glimpse into those insights, because obviously, personally, I know that that's going to be a very big focus for you. And I always like, and, I try to get that out of my the people that I speak to on my podcast, because I really truly believe that when you put things out there, magically, miraculously, somehow something happens and the universe shifts something in terms of your favor, and there might be a speaking opportunity landing, I don't know, maybe even from this conversation, because somebody thinks, oh, we need Beck to talk to our people and tell them about what's possible. Because from let's shift into corporate, this obviously hasn't yet fully made it into corporate. And when you think of everything that we have just talked about, for salespeople, for people in marketing, for anyone that has business development conversations, this is hugely powerful. Just because, like I had this job working in a medical device company, and suddenly I found myself calling on endocrinologists, and I was so out of my depth. And obviously, before every appointment that I went into, my nerves would go crazy and I wouldn't even know what to do. And like even the first couple of calls are probably completely messed up too, because I didn't have the confidence. So you can just take this to so many places. And, as manifesting generators, we have no shortage of ideas on where that could take place.
Yes.
But obviously jumping on podcasts is always a great opportunity to share that as well. With your collective,
Yes.
who are the women that typically find your collective or join your collective, just in case there is somebody in the audience that says, oh, I really need to know more about that. Like, what is it that you do?
Yeah, so thank you for asking me that. Really, the collective is made up of high achieving professional women. We talk, like we educate, we talk, and we support men and women, but this collective is specifically for women. So it's creating that beautiful safe space for women. So typically high achieving professionals who perhaps look successful on the outside and are successful on the outside, but they feel stuck. That's a word I hear a lot. They feel stuck, they feel overwhelmed or overloaded, perhaps a bit unfulfilled inside. They're like, everything looks good, I've got everything I should want or need, but something's not quite right. And so these are the types of, ambitious, perhaps leaders, managers, or go-getters, and might describe themselves as go-getters, who have spent years ticking all the right boxes. And you and I can relate to this. We've been ticking all the boxes in career, relationships, responsibilities, but perhaps still feel like something's missing. So we work with these women, help them break free from imposter syndrome, which is often one of those things that comes into play because they're in those particular roles, and it's almost like, how did I get here? Am I in the wrong place? Perfectionism, self-doubt, so that they can finally create a life that feels so good on the inside that, it feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside. If I can get that out. So these are the types of women. So, when we're talking about high achieving professionals, ambitious women, we're not talking, you don't have to be at a certain level in your professional career or anything, but it's women who want improvement or change, or they're probably already on this self-development, self-growth journey, but they're looking for the thing that is actually going to create that lasting change. And so all of the things that we've been talking about today, how your brain works, how you can make changes, how you filter information and how that has an impact, how you change beliefs, how you understand what your values are, all of these things we teach through live masterclasses in the collective. But then we also have an option for you to dial in and get some hot seat coaching. So if you're having a particular challenge, we can actually work through that there and then. And then it's also creating this beautiful collective. So there's women in the group who are already starting to reach out to each other outside of the collective, who are becoming friends. We've got a couple of members now in Victoria, so we are spreading nationwide as well, and those women are coming together as well. There's heaps of other stuff included in the collective, of course. That's just the tip of the iceberg, but it's essentially giving you the tools and the education to create that life that you want, like I said, that feels as good on the inside as it looks on the outside.
Two things that I want to touch on.
Yes.
So you just need to remind me of the second one, because otherwise I might go off on a manifesting generator shiny object tangent.
Yep.
The role that this has in corporate, because, corporate is not always the place where they would fund that type of education or that type of personal development. And I don't think I've ever even looked outside my organization, to be honest with you. I always, there were mentors, but then you had to really work hard to find the right mentor. And yeah, so the other thing is just investing in yourself, especially as a female. Like the amount of people that I had to, and I've stopped doing it, that I had to try and convince to invest in themselves, because I knew, I could see what they were capable of, but it was like, I can't afford it right now. why should I pay for this? Why shouldn't my employer pay for this? This is way too expensive. I mean, you just said an entire advertiser article on that topic, and I love the reframe that you put around that as well. Talk to us a little bit about, if you are still in the corporate world, you want to climb the ladder, can you really do it all by yourself? And what is the benefit of, joining a collective or working with you privately, one-on-one, whatever the offer might be?
Can you do it all by yourself? No, you can't do it all by yourself. It's like anything. Can you raise a child by yourself? I know there's a lot of single parents out there, but most people have help of some description, even if it's simply by being able to send your child to school for the day. That's a help. So we need to look at things a little bit differently. We all need help. If I want to build a house, now I have actually worked in the building industry, but if I want to build a house, I'm not going to start laying bricks. Right? I don't know how to pour a cement slab and build walls and put a roof on. I'm going to call a builder, right? And probably several other people involved in the project, and I'm going to ask them for their professional expertise. Coaching or support in anything is no different, and I think we need to start accepting that, and we need to stop looking at these things as though I should be able to do this on my own. I've got all the tools, I can read books, I can listen to podcasts. These are all great things, but we all need support. We need to find the right expert or specialist for us. So in answer to your question, can we do it all ourselves? A flat out no. We all need support. I have a coach. In fact, I have several coaches for different areas of my life. You're the same, and we have our collective, as in you and me, our collective, who we go to for support as well. So, the benefit of being involved in a collective, whatever that is that sometimes it can feel very lonely when we're making these changes, when we're doing the digging to figure out what it is that we need or want or plan to do. And so being surrounded by people who understand that, who are on the same journey, or maybe even a few steps ahead of you. So they I know, I understand what's going on at the moment. I'm not here to give you my opinion, but I'm here. I'm here for you, to listen to support you, and to let you know that you've got this, you'll get through this. So that is one of the biggest benefits of being part of a collective. Something you were talking about before in, with corporates, or the importance of investing in ourselves. Yes, look, I've heard it lots of times before as well. That's expensive. I can't afford that. And I'm not out to convince anyone, right? Okay, that's up to you. But I encourage people to ask themselves this question. What's it costing you if you don't do this? So if you don't ask for help, if you don't invest financially in yourself or whatever that might be, what's the state of your relationship right now? What's the state of your professional world? What's your relationship like with your kids, parents, friends? Are you earning enough money? Where is the actual problem or issue? And what's it going to cost you if you just keep going down this same path? It might be your health as well, and we all know the massive cost of ill health. So I encourage people to ask themselves that question. And with regards to having an employer, or if we're in corporate, whose responsibility is it to pay for this kind of thing? I actually just had a lady join the collective very recently, and she put the proposal to her organisation and they have paid for it.
Wow.
So you have to ask.
That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah, you have to ask, that old saying, you don't get if you don't ask, but be prepared. Why is it that this is going to make a difference? What results are you going to get from investing in this, or what results are they going to get? What's the return on investment? If we can speak corporate speak.
Yeah, go for it.
Yeah, what's the return on investment that your organization, your company, even if you're self-employed, what's the return on investment that they're going to get? And, that's going to help you with your reasoning in terms of, this is why I'm asking you to invest. Now, if they're not willing to invest the whole lot, can you go halves? There is always an option. And, this is something that I would even talk to my clients about if they need help with, how do I pitch this to my employer? you or I would do that, right? Because we truly believe that organizations need to invest in their people. You know, if the problems within the workplace are rarely about the workplace, they're often about what comes from before that. But if we can help people in their personal lives, that is going to make a much more
massive difference.
Effective, efficient, happy, fulfilled workplace. And what employer doesn't want that?
100%, because I think we really need to shift out. And I obviously only left corporate in 2022, but we need to shift out of only university is going to be acceptable as a personal development path, or anything that is like directly related to your job. Let's say you're in marketing and you just want to know a little bit more about how finances work so you can write business plans in a different way, or marketing plans. We need to shift away from just all those kind of skills and need to really have a look at, well, the person that is showing up at work, how are they showing up as? Can there be a shift or an improvement in that person's performance simply by doing everything that we have just talked about today? Because as we say, people that are connected to a why, and obviously we had that large generational shift over the last couple of years where people really want to be part of a why or a purpose. Helping them to articulate that and have clarity on that is so critically important. One thing that I also want to touch on is, doesn't it mean that potentially my employee will then say, sorry, I'm actually not suited to this anymore, I'm going elsewhere?
Yes.
Actually, it is one of the best things that can happen to a company, even though you might not immediately see it. But again, having a disengaged employee or somebody who's just not that into it, you will never get the same connection, passion, motivation out of that person than if you replaced and hired someone who was just so aligned with whatever it is that you're doing.
100%, Alison. As you were saying that, about 10 seconds before, I had popped into my head and thought, I want to say that. So yeah, of course, we're on the same wavelength here. But you're absolutely right. It's important that, if the large majority of people could or would work in a job or a company or an organization or a field that they were fully aligned with, which actually met their purpose, which satisfied their value, their personal professional values. Like you said, there'd be more efficiencies, more productivities, which is what corporates actually look at. They often look at the bottom line, the numbers. Pushing people just to achieve numbers, it's only a small part of it. So if we've got people who are aligned with what they're doing, who are in the right job, if we've got somebody in a job who it's their role to go out and talk to people, but actually they are better at a desk in an office behind a screen working on spreadsheets because that is what lights them up, then we want to know that as an employer, because we're not getting the best of that person here. They're probably going home feeling very depleted. It might be having an impact on their family life. That has a massive ripple effect in the world. And I also think just being a decent human being and wanting to see everybody do their best is an important part of my role as just being a person, right? As being a human being. So if I have learned this a little bit late, I left the corporate world in 2020, I think, and I wish that I had known more about this back then. But if somebody comes to me in the business and I'm their manager and they're like, look, I'm not sure this is the place for me, I don't, it's not lighting me up, rather than icing them out and going, well, bugger off then, I would love to be able to say to them, okay, I'm so glad that you have identified that. What can I do to help you find your passion in life? And thank you for giving me the opportunity to go and find somebody who's going to love doing this role. Let me just be a decent human being. How can I support you?
Yeah.
How good is that relationship?
I could dive into that even more because obviously, managers these days don't even have the time to do that because they're usually having teams that are well oversized and responsibilities, reporting up the chain, managing down the chain, and then still doing some sort of a job on the side. So I guess we're talking about the perfect world, and I wish I would have worked in a corporation like that. And I'm now exposed to that through the work that I obviously do here with Stephen and his business as well, because we had workshops around every person's human design. We had workshops, and these were well-being workshops. Stephen runs those well-being days quarterly, and like they now know if they want to run a project, well, who's the right person to put into which position for the project based on their strengths, based on their values, based on their human design, their energy type. So even just having that awareness has shifted a lot over here in the company as well, which is so amazing, so great. Well, the thing is, you and I, we could talk for days, and I'm sure it's not the last time that you have been on this podcast, because I think at some stage I would love to know, how did you tackle this whole speaking thing? Because obviously that has been a dream of yours for quite some time, and it obviously took some shifting and navigating for you to honor that call.
Yes.
So I would love to wait until you've had a couple of those speaking gigs under your belt, and then just get your perspective on it, both as a professional working in the field, but also just as a human being with the things that you had to conquer to obviously take that next step in your life. Any final thoughts that you would like to leave our listeners with? Obviously, we're going to share all your details in the show notes so people can follow you, they can check out your collective, they can listen to the podcast episode that you and I have recorded for your podcast as well, and any other episodes, obviously, that you have. So anything that you would like to leave our listeners with today?
Yeah, look, Alice, we've talked about a lot of things today, and I know that it can feel a little overwhelming after listening to a conversation like this, and you're like, oh my goodness, where do I even start? So I encourage people to just take a breath and keep things simple. The KISS method, keep it simple, sweetheart. And if I can offer anything, it's to take the time to reflect inward. Start with yourself, start with some of those basic tools, really bringing that self-awareness to the fore, and, ask for help if you're not sure how to do that. But start simply. This is not about adding a whole lot of stuff to your to-do list. It's really about bringing that alignment back to your life. And we're not taught how to do this, just like we're not taught how to build a house unless we go to carpentry school. We're not taught how to work in a fancy kitchen unless we go to chef school. So ask for help where you need it and keep it simple.
Yeah. Thank you so much for bringing us back together, because yes, manifesting generators, we go off on so many different tangents, also in conversations.
We do.
I think the final note that I just want to add to what you have just said is, if you start looking for help, I know the whole quantum stuff is out there, and quantum collapsing and quantum leaping. It's actually not that far-fetched, because if you try and do work by yourself, it can take you so much longer than if somebody can just point out to you, hey, this is where you're self-sabotaging, or this is where you're procrastinating. And luckily, I have surrounded myself with people that help me do that, because these are my personal blind spots, and that's the reason why I work with coaches as well. So don't be afraid. You don't need to jump into some of the expensive things to start with. There is great opportunities these days to join memberships, collectives, or anything like that, to put the feelers out and see what works for you and what doesn't.
That's right.
Awesome. Well, thank you everyone for jumping on today. Thank you for listening. This was a little bit of a longer episode, but it was a very important one because we did cover so many topics, and hopefully we've planted some seeds for people today as well. So feel free to reach out to any of us if you have questions. We're obviously here to help you.
Thanks for having me, Alice.